The relentless Arizona sun beat down on the manicured lawns of Willow Creek as Karen scurried back to her house, pulse racing. Had anyone seen her? She gripped the plastic sprinkler timer in her trembling hands. A ticking time bomb that would soon expose her deceitful act. But Karen was desperate, and she'd do whatever it took to get the upper hand, even if it meant jeopardizing her standing in the tight-knit community. Little did she know, her neighbor's watchful eyes had been on her the whole time too. Karen paced the kitchen, her mind racing. She'd just pulled off the unthinkable, tampering with her neighbor's sprinkler timer in the dead of night. It had been a bold move, but desperate times called for desperate measures. Her own lawn was starting to brown, while her neighbor's vibrant green grass mocked her with every glance. "I had no choice," she muttered, glancing out the window at the lush, verdant expanse next door. Her neighbor, Sarah, was meticulous about her lawn, an absolute perfectionist. Karen had tried politely asking for advice, but Sarah's suggestions had been condescending, her tips laced with subtle judgment. Karen slumped into a chair, staring at the sprinkler timer in her hands. She knew tampering with it was wrong, but the desperate need to one-up Sarah had overridden her conscience. Now, the nagging fear of getting caught consumed her. What if Sarah discovered the sabotage? The neighborhood was tight-knit, and word would spread like wildfire. Karen shuddered at the thought of the judgment and ridicule she'd face. The doorbell rang, and Karen nearly jumped out of her skin. Peeking through the curtains, she spotted her friend Lisa standing on the porch, a concerned expression on her face. "Karen, are you okay?" Lisa asked as Karen opened the door. "I saw you darting around outside last night. Is everything all right?" Karen's heart raced. Had Lisa seen her tampering with the timer? Yes, everything's fine," she lied, forcing a smile. "I was just, checking on my sprinklers. You know how finicky they can be." Lisa's brow furrowed. "Well, I hope you get them sorted out. Sarah's lawn is looking incredible, and I know how much it bothers you." She placed a hand on Karen's arm, her expression turning more serious. "Just remember, you can't win everything, you know? Maybe it's time to let that one go." Karen's face flushed with embarrassment. I know. I'll try. I promise." She forced another smile, silently praying Lisa hadn't seen anything incriminating. As Lisa turned to leave, Karen's gaze fell back to the sprinkler timer in her hands. The deed was done, and now she could only wait and see what happened next. With a heavy sigh, she placed the timer back on the kitchen counter, her stomach twisting with a mix of guilt and determined resolve. The next morning, Karen stepped outside, trying to act casual as she peered over the fence at Sarah's lush, green lawn. To her horror, she noticed the sprinklers were running, drenching the grass in a steady stream of water. Sarah must have discovered the tampering already. Karen's heart raced as she watched Sarah step outside, a frown creasing her brow. She walked over to the sprinkler timer, scrutinizing it closely. Karen held her breath, bracing for the inevitable confrontation. Moments later, Sarah marched over to Karen's front door and rang the bell. Karen reluctantly answered, pasting on an innocent smile. "Good morning, Sarah. What can I do for you?" Sarah's lips pressed into a thin line. "Karen, I think there's been a problem with my sprinkler timer. It's been running at the wrong times, and my water bill is astronomical. Do you happen to know anything about that?" Karen feigned surprise. "Your sprinkler timer? Oh no, that's dreadful. How strange. I haven't touched it, I swear." Sarah's eyes narrowed. "Really? Because I distinctly remember seeing you out here late last night, fiddling with it." Karen's stomach lurched. "I was just, checking on my own sprinklers. You know how finicky they can be." Sarah studied her carefully. "Well, I'm going to have to report this to the neighborhood council. Tampering with a neighbor's property is a serious offense. I can't believe you would do something like this." Karen's heart sank. The neighborhood council. Sarah, please, I didn't do anything. You have to believe me. I'm sorry, Karen, but the evidence seems pretty clear. Sarah turned and marched back to her house, leaving Karen standing on the porch, panic rising in her chest. She watched helplessly as Sarah disappeared inside, no doubt preparing to file a formal complaint. Karen's mind raced, trying to come up with a plan. She couldn't let Sarah get away with this. Not when she was the one who had started this whole mess. With a new sense of determination, Karen stepped back inside, slamming the door behind her. Karen paced her living room, mind whirling. She had to act fast before Sarah reported her to the neighborhood council. The thought of facing their scrutiny and potential punishment filled her with dread. Her reputation in the community was already on shaky ground. She couldn't afford another strike against her. Suddenly, an idea took root in her mind. If Sarah was going to play dirty, then so could she. Rushing to her computer, Karen began furiously typing, her fingers flying across the keyboard. She would get to the neighborhood council first and paint Sarah as the real villain. With a few well-crafted emails, she could turn the tables and shift the blame. An hour later, Karen leaned back, a triumphant smile spreading across her face. Her messages to the neighborhood council were concise and compelling, outlining Sarah's history of snobbish behavior and highlighting the suspicious incident with the sprinkler timer. Karen knew it was a risky gambit, but desperate times called for desperate measures. Just as she was about to hit send, the doorbell rang again. Peering through the curtains, Karen's stomach dropped. It was Lisa. Taking a deep breath, she opened the door, pasting on a worried expression. "Lisa, what a surprise. Is everything okay?" Lisa's brow was furrowed with concern. "Karen, I just got a call from Sarah. She says you tampered with her sprinkler timer. I can't believe you would do something like that." Karen feigned innocence. I know. It sounds terrible. But Lisa, you have to believe me. I didn't do it. Sarah is just trying to get me in trouble with the neighborhood council." Lisa's eyes widened. The neighborhood council. "Karen, what did you do?" "Nothing," Karen exclaimed, throwing her hands up in frustration. "I was just defending myself. You know how Sarah can be. She's always looking for ways to one-up everyone. I couldn't just let her accuse me like that." Lisa shook her head. "Karen, this is not the way to handle this. You need to go to the council and tell them the truth, not make up some story." "The truth?" Karen scoffed. "The truth won't do me any good, Lisa. Sarah's the one who started all this. I'm just trying to protect myself." Lisa's expression hardened. "Karen, I know you've been struggling with your lawn, but this is not the answer. You're only going to make things worse. Please, just tell the council what really happened." Karen's resolve wavered for a moment, but then she straightened her shoulders. "I'm sorry, Lisa, but I can't do that. I have to do what's best for me." With that, she closed the door, leaving a stunned Lisa standing on the porch. Turning back to her computer, Karen took a deep breath and hit send, sending her messages to the neighborhood council. The die was cast. Now she could only wait and see how the drama would unfold. The next morning, Karen anxiously paced her living room, her eyes glued to the clock. Any minute now, the neighborhood council would be calling. She had to be ready to plead her case and shift the blame squarely onto Sarah. Just as Karen was about to give in to her growing sense of dread, the phone rang. Taking a deep breath, she answered. "Hello, this is Karen." "Mrs. Simmons, this is Judith from the neighborhood council. We've received some concerning reports about a dispute between you and your neighbor, Sarah. Can you tell us what happened?" Karen launched into her carefully rehearsed story, her voice dripping with false sincerity. "Oh, Judith, it's just been a terrible misunderstanding. Sarah has been harassing me for months about the state of my lawn, always making snide comments and offering unsolicited advice. I've tried to be the bigger person, but last night, I noticed her tampering with my sprinkler timer. I was simply trying to fix the issue when she caught me." Judith's voice was measured. "I see. And do you have any evidence to support these claims? Evidence? Karen feigned surprise. Well, no, not exactly. But surely you can understand how upsetting it is to be accused of something so underhanded, especially by someone with a history of snobbish behavior. I'm an upstanding member of this community, Judith. Surely my word counts for something. Judith paused for a moment. Mrs. Simmons, the council takes these matters very seriously. We'll need to investigate further before making any determinations. In the meantime, I'd advise you and Sarah to refrain from any further confrontations. Can you agree to that? Karen gripped the phone tightly, her knuckles turning white. Of course, of course. You have my word, Judith. I just hope Sarah can show a little more restraint as well. After a few more perfunctory pleasantries, the call ended, and Karen slumped back onto the sofa, exhaling a shaky breath. The council was going to investigate, which meant she still had time to get her story firmly in place. Glancing out the window at Sarah's perfectly manicured lawn, Karen's jaw tightened with determination. She wasn't about to let that smug, holier-than-thou neighbor ruin everything. If the council wouldn't take her word, then she'd have to find another way to tip the scales in her favor. The next few days passed in a haze of tension and uncertainty for Karen. She waited anxiously for any word from the neighborhood council, jumping at every phone call, only to be disappointed. Surely they must be investigating Sarah's claims by now. Where was the call summoning her to a hearing? Unable to sit still, Karen began pacing the perimeter of her yard, eyeing Sarah's lush, green grass with growing resentment. How dare that woman try to get her in trouble? Karen had to find a way to shift the blame back where it belonged. As she paced, an idea slowly began to take root in her mind. What if she could catch Sarah in the act of tampering with the sprinklers? With the council already investigating, the evidence would be damning. She'd finally get the upper hand and restore her good name. Filled with renewed purpose, Karen hurried inside and began rummaging through her closet. After a few minutes, she emerged holding a small battery-powered camera. Carefully, she positioned it near the sprinkler timer, angling it to capture a clear view of the entire area. Then, with a triumphant smile, she retreated back into the house, leaving the camera to do its work. For the next 2 nights, Karen kept a vigilant watch, her eyes glued to the screen of her laptop as the camera's footage streamed in. But Sarah never showed. Just as Karen was beginning to lose hope, on the 3rd night, movement on the screen caught her eye. There, in the dim light of the street lamp, was Sarah, creeping across the lawn towards the sprinkler timer. Karen's heart raced as she watched, her fingers tightening around the edge of the laptop. This was it, the proof she needed to clear her name. Just as Sarah reached for the timer, the camera's infrared light flashed, bathing the scene in a soft glow. Sarah froze, her head snapping towards the camera. For a moment, their eyes locked through the lens, and Karen could see the panic in Sarah's expression. Triumphantly, Karen reached for the phone, ready to call the neighborhood council and expose Sarah's deceit. But just as she was about to dial, she hesitated. What if the council didn't believe her? What if they sided with Sarah again? Chewing her lip, Karen stared at the screen, watching as Sarah hurried back to her house, disappearing into the shadows. Maybe there was a better way to handle this, a way to get the upper hand without risking the council's wrath. With a newfound determination, Karen began to formulate her next move. The next morning, Karen emerged from her house, a plan firmly in place. She strode purposefully across the lawn, heading straight for Sarah's front door. It was time to take matters into her own hands. When Sarah opened the door, her expression immediately darkened. Karen, what do you want? Karen forced a smile. Good morning, Sarah. I was hoping we could talk. Neighbor to neighbor. Sarah eyed her warily. About what? I thought the neighborhood council was handling this. Well, that's just it, Karen said, her tone dripping with feigned concern. I've been thinking a lot about this whole situation, and I realized we're both just victims here. Someone is clearly trying to stir up trouble between us. and I don't think that's fair to either of us. Sarah's brow furrowed. What are you saying? Karen took a step closer. I think we should work together to get to the bottom of this. After all, we're both upstanding members of this community, and I'm sure the council would rather see us resolve this amicably than have them get involved. Sarah eyed her skeptically. Amicably? Karen, you tampered with my sprinkler system. Did I? Karen asked, raising an eyebrow. Or did someone else try to make it look like I did? Think about it, Sarah. Isn't it a bit convenient that the council is investigating me, but not you? Sarah's eyes widened as the implications sank in. You think someone is trying to frame us both? Karen nodded solemnly. It's the only explanation that makes sense. And if we work together, we might just be able to figure out who's really behind all this. Sarah seemed to consider this for a moment, her gaze fixed on Karen's face. Finally, she sighed and stepped aside, gesturing for Karen to come in. All right, Karen. I'm listening. As Karen stepped across the threshold, a small smile tugged at the corners of her mouth. Her plan was working perfectly. With Sarah on her side, she could finally get the upper hand and uncover the true culprit behind this neighborhood drama. Sarah and Karen sat across from each other in the dimly lit living room, an uneasy silence hanging between them. After Karen's unexpected offer of truce, the two women were trying to figure out their next move. So, you really think someone is trying to frame us both? Sarah asked, her brow furrowed. Karen nodded solemnly. It's the only explanation that makes sense. Think about it. The neighborhood council is investigating me, but not you. And the timing of the sprinkler timer tampering is just too convenient. Sarah considered this, her fingers drumming against the arm of the chair. Okay, let's say you're right. Who could possibly have a motive to do this? Karen leaned forward, her expression serious. That's what we need to figure out. Whoever it is, they're clearly trying to stir up trouble between us. And we both know the consequences if the council decides to punish us. Sarah's eyes widened. You're right. My reputation in this community means everything to me. I can't afford to be labeled as some kind of vandal or troublemaker. Exactly, Karen said, her voice low and intense. That's why we need to work together to uncover the truth. If we can prove that someone else is behind this, we can clear both of our names. Sarah nodded slowly, her gaze fixed on Karen. Okay, I'm in. What's your plan? Karen's lips curved into a triumphant smile. Well, I've already got the first piece of the puzzle. A few nights ago, I caught you on camera messing with the sprinkler timer. Sarah's face paled. You what? How dare you? Karen raised a hand to cut her off. Hear me out. I didn't call the council right away because I realized that wasn't the best move. Instead, I've been thinking. What if we use that footage to our advantage? Sarah's brow furrowed. Our advantage. How? Simple, Karen said, leaning back in her chair. We use it to draw out the real culprit. Whoever is behind this is clearly trying to turn us against each other. So we stage a little confrontation, make it look like we're at each other's throats. And then, when the real troublemaker shows up to gloat, we catch them red-handed. Sarah's eyes widened as she considered the plan. That could actually work. But what if the council finds out about the footage? Karen waved a dismissive hand. Leave that to me. I'll handle the council. All you need to do is play along. Sarah hesitated for a moment, then slowly nodded. All right, Karen. Let's do it. As the two women began to hash out the details of their scheme, a sense of cautious optimism began to replace the tension in the room. For the first time, they were united in a common goal, and both were determined to come out on top. The following day, the stage was set. Karen and Sarah had carefully orchestrated their confrontation, their voices raised in a heated argument as they stood on the sidewalk between their respective properties. I can't believe you would do this, Sarah, Karen shouted, her face flushed with feigned anger. Tampering with my sprinklers. After everything I've done to try and be a good neighbor. Sarah responded with equal vehemence. Your good neighbor act is nothing but a facade, Karen. We all know how you really feel about my lawn. This was just your way of getting back at me. As the two women continued to trade accusations, a crowd of curious onlookers began to gather, drawn by the commotion. Karen watched from the corner of her eye, waiting for the real culprit to make their move. Sure enough, after a few minutes, a figure emerged from the shadows, creeping towards the sprinkler timer. Karen's heart raced as she recognized the person. It was their neighbor, Lisa. Lisa? Sarah exclaimed, her eyes widening in surprise. Lisa froze, her gaze darting between the two women. I didn't mean to interrupt. I was just, checking on the sprinklers. Karen stepped forward, her expression triumphant. Save it, Lisa. We know exactly what you've been up to. As if on cue, the small camera hidden in the bushes flashed to life, capturing Lisa's guilty expression. Karen turned to the gathered crowd, her voice ringing out with authority. Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you the real troublemaker, our dear friend Lisa. She's been the one tampering with the sprinkler timers, all in an effort to turn Sarah and I against each other. The crowd erupted in murmurs of shock and disbelief, their eyes fixed on the now cornered Lisa. Sarah stepped forward, her voice laced with disgust. How could you do this, Lisa? What possible reason could you have? Lisa's shoulders slumped in defeat. I was just so tired of you two always one-upping each other. I thought if I could get you both in trouble, maybe you'd finally leave me alone. Karen shook her head, her expression a mix of triumph and pity. Well, Lisa, your little scheme has backfired. Now, I think it's time we let the neighborhood council know exactly what you've been up to. As the crowd parted to allow Karen and Sarah to escort the now shamed Lisa to the council's office, a sense of justice and vindication filled the air. The neighborhood drama had finally been resolved, and order had been restored. Karen glanced over at Sarah, a wry smile on her lips. Well, I guess we can both breathe a sigh of relief. Looks like our little partnership paid off after all. Sarah nodded, a hint of a smile playing on her own lips. I have to admit, you're not as bad as I thought, Karen. Maybe we can work on our lawn care tips together sometime. The two women shared a newfound understanding as they walked side by side, leaving the drama of the past few weeks firmly behind them.